In this presentation I want to talk about Toad for Oracle DBAs, and I want to demo Toad DBA Suite, covering three kind of key areas where we see DBAs and DBA teams are often challenged. One is the ability to efficiently and simplify routine maintenance tasks, sort of tasks that DBAs perform on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Performance diagnostics and resolution, so identifying the root cause of a performance slowdown as quickly and effectively as possible, and discovering the root cause and resolving the problem as quickly as possible to keep the business up and running. And then thirdly, we see that there are a lot of risks associated with planned changes in the database, and we want to try and help DBAs mitigate the risks of these planned changes, which could come from database configuration changes, patches, upgrades, or even changes coming from development. Now I want to talk about the Toad editions, which editions are available in Toad for DBAs, and then finally where you can go to find out more information about Toad specifically around database administration on Oracle. And what I want to start off with in Toad is the database browser. Now the database browser is accessible from the main toolbar. There it is there. And this is a very good sort of alternative to using Schema browser. And the reasons will become clear as I start expanding these out. So what you'll see on the left hand side are basically servers and databases. So effectively in one screen you can see all your servers and databases split out with access to all the database objects, schema objects, and so forth, without having multiple schema browsers open. I can click on the database, I can get an overview of that database in terms of SGA usage, share pool usage, percentage hit rates, event weights, and other metrics. I can also view information about the instance itself, the database, its option settings, any sessions that are currently open, what the top sessions are, rollback segment usage, space usage, data file I/O, etc. I can also get access to schema objects. If I click on the schema objects node, then the right hand side actually gives me effectively schema browser embedded inside the database browser window, where I can change schema name and I can change the object type. So if I select an object such as a table, on the left hand side I get the same tabs on the right hand side as I would do had I been in Schema browser. So the nice thing with the database browser is it lets me see all my servers and databases, and it keeps me in that one place. I can use this like my console to drive all my activity. If I right click this particular database I want to manage, you can see also there are a number of popular tasks that I can perform directly from the database browser window, and one of those is the database health check. Now the database health check is a reporting tool which lets you report on the whole range of various aspects of your database, the configuration, the performance, information that's in the alert log, storage information, schema information, production level information. If you're using rack clusters, there are a set of checks there specifically around rack. There's a section called vulnerability assessment, which looks at how exposed your database may be from attacks through Oracle user accounts. If you're running a database on a virtual machine, there are a number of checks there for that. And then finally, if you have any Exadata appliances in your organization, there are a number of checks which check the configuration of your Exadata appliance. Then you can go ahead and run the health check against that database. There are a number of other checks for other databases already defined. Go ahead and run that check. You can see some interesting things actually appearing in the report. For example, there's under configuration there's a check for Oracle Enterprise Edition feature usage, and there are checks for usages of the tuning pack and the diagnostics pack, because we feel that this is one of these things you need to be aware of. And there's also a separate reporting tool which reports the same information. Once this report is run, having configured it for that particular database, is you can persist the information by checking this button here. and this will save this Windows state with all its settings into an app, and you can give this a name. Let's call it Health Check. Call it Health Check 99 because I think I've got some others there, and click OK. And then that's saved into the automation tool. Now I can access those anytime I want to by selecting the rerun menu, and you see under the rerun menu there's the health check right there with 122 checks on that particular database, as well as other things that I've saved as saved Windows states as well. So let's go into the task automation tool itself. This is called the Automation Designer, and in Automation Designer you'll see the health check window persisted state that I saved earlier on. And in fact, if I right click this and look at its properties just to really prove it, that's the check I ran before. There's the database, and these are the checks I had previously selected, so it's saved that window state. If I expand these other items out, you see that this is part of a kind of an extended workflow that I've created here called DBA demo, and I can move this check into here. In fact, there's another health check I've already created, so I could maybe remove this one here and have this one in its place. So these are a number of other checks that I've got, and I've put them together into this workflow. There's even some conditional logic there, and this becomes you know, a daily set of tasks I can run, which I can schedule. So there's access to the Windows task scheduler here. I can schedule all of these jobs and just have them run, you know, once a day or once a week, whenever I want to. I can very easily add in additional checks directly inside of Automation Designer and have those as part of my workflow. A lot of the database administration tasks are available from the right mouse click inside the database browser, such as Session Browser, Top Session Finder, Database Monitor. Equally, there are also many more available under the database menu itself in Toad. So under Database Administer, and these are grouped by functional paradigms. If I want to administer something like table spaces or Oracle parameters, then it's the Administer. If I want to compare two things, I can compare data, schemas, etc. If I want to diagnose something, I've got the Alert Log Viewer. I've got my Database Health Check, of course, and I've got a number of other things as well. All the export features are here, import features, all the monitoring tools such as the Database Monitor, Session Browsers under here, and optimization tools such as Auto Optimize, Advanced SQL Optimization. The Oracle Tuning Advisor can be reached through here, and finally reporting tools such as the Code Roadmap and ER Diagram, and HTML reports for schema reporting, as well as database configuration reports. The other windows that's useful to have a look at when you've got a system that's got a lot of users on is the Session Browser. And if I right click this database and select Session Browser, Session Browser opens. So let's say you had a user session that was consuming a lot of resource and you wanted to see what that user was doing. You could start a trace on that user session. So select the user session and you just simply click on Start Trace, and there are different types of trace: DBS Monitor, DBMS System, and DBMS Support. I'm just going to go with the DBS Monitor one and include any weights and binds. So that's my trace started, and it's highlighted in green to indicate that it's started. So I'm going to go across to this user and run a SQL statement a couple of times just to create some. So let's say you've got a user session that is fairly heavy on resource and you just want to see what the user is doing. You can start a trace running on this session. I'm just going to go for this default one. So that's my trace started, and then stop the trace. And so I can see here the SQLs that I executed exposed in here, and you can see any weight summary information, any weights by object, query summary, so you get a breakdown of what types of queries have been run, and the file header right here. If you have a lot of scripts that you execute as a DBA, and most DBAs have scripts they run against different databases, then you can execute them very easily inside of the database browser. The first thing you need to do is to actually catalog them with Toad, so you can access them really quickly by database. And for that, if you go to the Utilities menu and select Script Manager, Script Manager allows you to group all your scripts together. Here's some sample ones. You can create new categories of scripts using the new data file, and you can register your scripts into a data file. And once these scripts are presented in this lower panel, then you can check them using this column on the File menu checkbox, and they'll become what are known as quick scripts. Now, quick script, once you have them selected in this lower panel, gives the ability to access them straight from here. If I right click a database and go to execute quick scripts, you can see I've got different categories of scripts, and I can simply select a script to run from either of these and just go ahead and run them. So that's going to really save a lot of time. First of all, looking for your scripts and then selecting them and then making sure they're running against the right database, because you might have different ones that run against different databases. So that's a really quick and easy way of managing your scripts. Okay, so now I want to move on to performance diagnostics, and what I want to start off with first of all is showing you the database monitor in Toad, because there's a way in which you can combine the database monitor in Toad with a real-time diagnostics tool in the DBA suite called Spotlight on Oracle. So if you've got a lot of databases to manage, it will be much more expedient to actually have the database monitor be the trigger for a launch of Spotlight, depending upon when you have an issue. So database monitor collects a number of metrics from each of your databases and displays them in these series of graphs, as you can see here: logical I/O, sessions, SGA usage, event weights, and so on. But what you can do in here is you can configure it so that when you have an alert, and there are 50 different categories here for which you can set up alerts. I've set up a real simple one just to illustrate how this works, with a minimum and maximum threshold. So if I exceed a maximum of one active session, which is pretty easy to do, I'll fire off an alert and I'll be able to illustrate how you can launch Spotlight. So once your alerts have been configured, when an alert appears, and it will appear in the system tray in Windows, then that will tell you that you've exceeded the threshold of one of the metrics you're measuring. And so what will happen is this little icon, Toad Database Monitor, will start flashing. You right click it and you launch Spotlight on Oracle against that connection. So once Spotlight is open, and this is Spotlight on Oracle, you'll be able to see where you've got a problem. So just to illustrate how effective using the database monitor and Spotlight in combination is, I'm going to create a condition in my database where I've got a problem, and then show Spotlight highlight that error. So I'm going to run this statement here, which is going to place an exclusive lock on the OW customers table. In this session here, now I'm going to attempt to update a value in that table, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's come back to the database monitor. Okay, so we've got a problem right here. So I'm going to right click and launch Spotlight against my session. So Spotlight is open, and in Spotlight we're looking at the complete Oracle architecture. So we're looking at user sessions, we're looking at the host, whether it's a Unix host or a Windows host, server processes, the SGA, including the buffer cache, shared pool, redo, background processes over here, and on the right hand side, storage. So disk storage, flashback, redo, and archive. Spotlight is calibrated so that it has a number of different thresholds which will indicate through a color change where the database is being stressed, where green is no stress and red is heavily stressed, and then there are a range of colors in between which give you a graduation before you get to a point where you've got a problem. And as you can see right here, there's a problem here. If I click on here, I can see I've got a lock wait alarm, and underneath the text explains what a lock wait alarm is, and I can see there are a number of different things I can do straight off of this. The key one is this blocking locks drill down. So if I click on that, then I'll go into the activity sub-screen of Spotlight, and it will highlight the blocking locks tab. In other words, it takes me straight to the root cause of the problem, which is I've got a lock problem. And if I click on this session here, I can see that this user, quest_prod, is attempting a select star from customers for update. And if I look at this session, I can see here that this user is attempting to update some data in that table, and they can't because it's locked. So very quickly, just in a few seconds, Spotlight has highlighted where the problem is, and then allowing me to correct the problem. In this particular case, if I right-click this user, I can kill the session or disconnect the session. If it's something which is just a slowdown, then I can start a trace running on that session in a similar way that I did earlier on in Toad, and investigate the trace file. In this particular case, I'm just going to kill the session that's causing it. So I'm going to kill this session here, and then eventually that lock will clear as a resource becomes available. Now if I've got a problem which is a slowdown, which I suspect is due to SQL execution, I can go to the SQL and application workload screen and set some criteria that are designed to filter the SQL that I'm looking for, perhaps by user. So this is a SQL criteria wizard, and I'm looking for, say I'm looking for CPU. There are a number of other metrics I could examine as well, and I'm looking for anything that has a select statement by this parsing user quest_perf. Let's finish, and you can see here I've got a number of SQLs that are being displayed. Let's order them by, they are ordered by CPU actually, but that was the filter I set. So this is the one that's consuming the most CPU currently, which is this one here. And I can take this SQL and pass it into the SQL optimizer and have it optimized. So this is a very good example of a direct sort of root cause diagnostics and resolution straight from Spotlight. If I launch this, this will take that SQL statement into the SQL optimizer component of the DBA suite and allow me to tune that SQL. So once the SQL statement comes in, you can modify the binds so that the actual values, the one from Spotlight has some bind variables in there, and I'm going to go ahead and auto-optimize. So auto-optimize is just going to look for SQL rewrites, not indexes. And it's going to, at the bottom part of the screen, it's going to look for alternatives. If it finds an alternative SQL statement that runs faster than the original one, based on the default of elapsed time, that's the default optimization goal. If you have a different goal that you want to set, such as CPU or I/O, you can change that through the option settings. But the default is elapsed time, and it will keep looking for alternatives until it finds one. So it's found one there, alternative 19. Puts a little gold cup at the side of it, so you know which one is the fastest one so far. And then you can stop optimization any time, or you can just leave it to run to the end. So if I stop the optimization process, so I can see currently 19 is the one that's the fastest one so far, and if I go to the compare screen, I can compare them side by side. So if I set this one over here to be 19, one with a cup on it, you can see that it's using a use merge, and then it's merging two tables together. And then the other thing that's different as well, you see highlighted in green there, is the where clause. You can also compare the execution plan, see how they're different, and then that rewrite then is the one that you would use in the application. There's also a report. If you need to give a report to somebody explaining or justifying why you want to have that SQL rewritten, there's a report there with all of the evidence there, and a lot of detail there, different stats to explain why that SQL statement is the best one to use. So while we're in SQL Optimizer, there's a couple of other modules in SQL Optimizer that you need to consider as well. One is Optimize Indices. So Optimize Indices takes a unique approach to looking for indexes that are going to improve workload performance. Rather than looking at individual SQL statements or even groups of SQL statements, what this module does is actually look for SQL that's in a workload. It's looking for a SQL workload. Now, a SQL workload can come from different places. It can come from AWR, it can come from the SGA, it can come from a batch of source code or a script or something like that. Let me show you an example. So if I look at this is a previously executed session, and this collection was a SQL workload coming from the SGA. So I selected SGA as my workload. I specified a period of time over which I wanted to collect SQL statement, and it found all of these different SQL statements, 44 different SQL statements. It breaks them down into the types. I can look at them one by one if I need to, and then before I look for indexes, I need to set the primary goal, which I set to cost. I can schedule the process as it's looking for indexes, and I can set any termination criteria, such as if you find 50% improvement then stop, or if you don't find an improvement after so long, stop, or just stop searching after a predefined period of time, and then you can start the process running. Now say this is one that was done earlier on, but if I go back to the beginning of when it started processing, you can see what happens is that this feature is designed to reduce the amount of workload, so it's looking for a percentage workload change as it finds each successive index. As it finds or makes an index recommendation, it puts a vertical bar. You can hover the mouse over there and look at the reduction in the workload that's been affected by that index recommendation, and the next one, and the next one, and so forth. So at the time this was paused, there was an improvement of 87%. And I can go to the results screen and I can look at the results. So in the results here, there were 10 indexes recommended. There's a list of them there with the tables and the index columns, and also there were 12 SQL statements in that collection from the SGA that were improved as a result of creating those indexes. So you get a much more workload centric view of the effect of having indexes rather than creating indexes randomly for with the aim of improving a single execution of SQL. This is a much more holistic approach, if you will, to reducing workload. So finally, I want to look at change management, and as I mentioned at the beginning, there are a lot of risks associated with planned changes, and DBAs really need to understand the risks before they go ahead and make those changes. And there are a couple of ways in the Toad DBA suite where you can assess the risk. In fact, if we go back to the SQL Optimizer, one of those actually is in here, Analyze Impact. The Analyze Impact module in SQL Optimizer allows you to model a change before you implement the change. On the left hand side you can see different types of typical changes, such as parameter changes, custom scripts to simulate a change in state of the database that you want to simulate, the effect of additional indexes on the database. Another example of how I can use DBA Suite to assess the risk of changes is by using Database Workload Replay. And Database Workload Replay is a feature of the Benchmark Factory component of the Toad DBA Suite. And in here we use a method where we capture transactions, application transactions from production, and we replay them in a test environment. So once Benchmark Factory is opened, you simply go to the New button, which launches the Load Scenario Wizard. I go to the next step and select Capture Replay Oracle Workload and go to Next. You can see I've already got one capture in place, so I'm going to select this button here to create a new capture. And in here I'm going to log on as systems. This is my connection information here. I can test the connection to make sure it works okay. And we go to the next step. And so there's two methods in which you can capture workload. One is the Oracle Trace File method, and the other one is the Oracle Fine Grained Auditing. And you can see some help associated with each of these. You can see the difference between the two methods. Trace files, of course, can be generated both in Spotlight component of DBA Suite and in Toad itself through the session browser. So I've got one that I generated earlier on right here, and I'm ready to replay that on my target database. So let me cancel out of here. So this is one that I ran earlier on. This is a workload replay that I took that capture file from and replayed it against my test database, and I'm looking at the effect of a different configuration of my target database to see what effect that's going to have on my database workload that I captured. So if I look at the report for this, so you can see that when I replayed my capture on my target database, I actually had an 85% degradation in performance during that replay compared to the capture process. So the other type of plan change that DBAs have to deal with is changes coming from development, schema changes coming from development. And in Toad there is a way in which you can compare the production schema with the changes coming from development. Alternatively, if the change is being driven through data model, there's a way of doing that too in the Toad DBA suite. So I'm going to go to this user session, which is my production database, as you can see here, and then launch the schema compare. So there's my connection I'm using, there's my production schema, and I want to compare that against a development schema. So here in my connection, my target connection is the same user connection, but this time I'm connecting to the Quest dev schema, and I want to look at the differences there. If you want to compare a source with multiple targets, you can also include additional user connections using the plus button here, add another target schema, or you can use what is called a schema definition file, which is like a snapshot, which is generated inside of Toad, which is a point-in-time representation of a schema, and you can use that to compare against your source. I can then go to the Options tab, and I can select the objects that I want to compare. I can select any miscellaneous options, such as objects that I want to include or objects that I want to exclude. So I can create an exclusion file which contains objects that I don't want to compare because I know they're going to be different. And then once I've done that, I'm ready to run the comparison. So here is a report which shows all the objects which are different, or objects that are only in one schema, not the other one, and vice versa. And then the synchronization script appears in here. And this is a script then the DBA can use to roll those changes out into production. And it's a faithful reproduction because it's a direct comparison of the objects between the production database and those that have come from development. So using the Toad Data Modeler components of the Toad DBA suite, you can compare the production schema represented as a physical data model in Toad Data Modeler versus the changes that are coming along from development. So here, this baseline, as I've got here, would represent, for example, what would be in production, and then this model here would represent the additional changes coming from development, which I've represented as an additional table in the schema here. So once you've checked the schema layout in terms of its structure, does it make sense? Do those changes from development make sense for a production environment? Does it need to be modified in some way? Then you can go ahead and do differences between these two different data models. So Toad Data Modeler is a data modeling tool for developers and DBAs that does physical data modeling and logical data modeling. It's cross-platform, works with Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, etc. And it gives you a way of representing the schema as a model, and you can reverse engineer objects from the database into the data model and make changes. Okay, so to do a differences between the two, I'm going to do a alter script. So I go to sync and convert, select the sync and convert wizard, and I want to generate an alter report. So I select compare models and generate alter report, and go to the next step. So my initial model will be my baseline one, and my right side model will be my other one, this one representing the changes from development. And then I'll just take all the defaults. You've got various options you can set, option types in terms of which objects you want to compare. I'll just go right ahead and do a comparison. So you can see here, if I look at the entities, you can see that on the version 2, which is the changes coming from development, I've got the addition of a supplier table. I can see the attributes, I can see the keys, and any other changes that are there, and I can go ahead and generate that alteration script. So just to conclude this presentation, these are the various Toad editions that are available for DBAs. You can start off with the database administration module and simply add that to any edition of Toad that you already might have, such as the professional or the base or the expert edition. And by adding the DB admin module, you're adding a whole range of database administration features, some of which I've covered at the beginning of this presentation, to your Toad. If you want to have a complete sort of end-to-end range of tools that not only cover database administration tasks but also address performance management and change management, this is where you'll need the Toad DBA suite. Toad DBA suite includes the Expert Edition with the DB admin module together with Spotlight on Oracle, as well as Spotlight on MySQL and Spotlight on operating systems, so the Unix Linux flavor and the Windows flavor, as well as Spotlight on Oracle Data Guard. Included with that is Toad Data Modeler for physical and logical data modeling, Backup Reporter, which shows the state of your RMAN backups across all of your databases, and Benchmark Factory for database workload replay. And then in addition to that, there are two further suites, one which specializes in RAC and one which specializes in Exadata. And then finally, where to go to find more information on Toad. First of all, try out our website, and there you'll see trial downloads, lots more information about different editions, events that are coming up such as webcasts, documentation such as white papers and case studies and things like that. The Toad World community is the one-stop shop for any technical aspects of using Oracle and using the Toad products. It has expert blogs, lots of video clips, technical articles, user forums. You can access the different betas for the different components of the products and so forth. So I hope you found that useful, and thank you for listening.